Hi everyone and welcome to this video. So in this video we're going to be learning how to build web applications using the Masonite framework. Masonite is an MVC web framework that allows us to build applications in the Python programming language. It is very similar to frameworks such as Ruby on Rails and Laravel in PHP. So if you've worked with such frameworks and you want to learn Masonite, it is actually going to be simple as it carries most of the functionality and how to build web applications that is very similar to the way you may build those applications in Laravel or Ruby on Rails. If you like this video, please leave a like and let us get into the video. So when I go to our VS Code right here, I've created a simple folder, and within that folder we have a virtual environment already set up. So when I do pip list, I have actually installed my Masonite within this folder. So what we shall do is to basically go ahead and basically set up our project. So when you look into our folder right here, we have Masonite and all the project dependencies it depends on. So I'll just go ahead and begin to set up our project. Now every time we install Masonite, we get access to the project command, and what this helps us do is to basically generate a new project. So when you say project, we're going to get access to the various commands, and those available commands are the help, which helps us to display the manual, install that helps us to install our dependencies, key that helps us to generate a new application key, and start that helps us to basically start our project or create our project. So I'm going to clear our terminal, and all I have to do is to say project and then start. So this will go ahead and generate for us a new Masonite project within our project folder. Now if you're wondering how I installed Masonite, I actually installed it with pip and then install Masonite. So just did that as a step to save time. So this is going to go ahead and create our Masonite project within our folder. So it seems like we have an error, and this error is basically saying us we actually have a slow internet connection. I think I'm going to just write the command. So our folder structure has been generated right here, and this is actually very similar to how we may have it in Laravel or Ruby on Rails. And within here we have very many folders, but I'm going to basically tackle those that you may encounter on different occasions. So right here we have this app folder, and it's basically a folder that allows us to basically have our controllers, our middleware, our models and providers. It is basically the folder that we shall be interacting with most of the times. And we also have the config folder, that is basically a folder that will hold most of our configuration settings for our application. We have a database folder that's going to hold most of the logic for our database, such as how we're going to describe our table using migrations and how we're going to seed our database for testing and stuff like that. Now we also have our resources folder, and this basically holds the static assets of our application, such as the CSS and the JS. Just like you see here, we have routes folder. Now this is a very important folder that's going to allow us to basically attach routes to the different controller methods that we shall describe as you're going to see. So just after doing this, then we shall check in our storage, and this is basically where we have the public folder, that is the one that we can access on our application. Now since we are building a server-side application, what we're going to be having is a public folder that will be only accessed publicly, and this basically contains our file icon, our logo and our robots.txt. So when you go ahead, we also have a templates folder, and what this has is the different HTML templates that we shall be using for our app. So within here, when you look into our base.html, we have a simple HTML file that is basically a template because it has our Jinja 2 templating engine, helping us to handle most of the backend logic on our view side. So most of the views are going to be in HTML. You may be able to mix in your Jinja 2 templating language to help you do different logic just like you do in Django and Flask. So I'm going to close this for now. Now another one is going to be the tests, and this is where I will actually go ahead and write our test cases. Now our test cases are very similar to how we may write them in Django, and they're very similar to how you may write test cases using unit test. So right from that, we are going to have our env files. Now the first env file we shall have is one that's going to hold all our settings specific to our project, and we already have the different settings already available, and those are the app specific settings that we have here, such as the app debug and the app environment. We also have the app secret key, the app URL, the hashing function, and so on and so forth. Now if we want to set up a database, what we shall have to do is to go to the database specific settings, and here we have our default database as SQLite. However, in this video I'm going to be setting up a MySQL database, so I'm going to be changing this in a moment. So we have the different settings for S3, that's if you're doing some file uploads, JWT for JWT authentication, queuing, Slack tokens, Vonage keys, and so on. So let us go ahead and also look at env example. So this is basically a file that allows us to show us how we may organize these settings if you are creating a new env file. So env.testing is an environment specific, contains environment variables for basically testing and stuff like that. Git ignore holds what you don't want to push to Git, and craft, and this is actually the most important file because it helps us to manage our application, and it's very similar to how you may see the manage.py file in Django that helps us to run different management things or different management settings for our application. It actually provides for us a CLI way in which we can interact with our application. So I'm going to be closing this for now. Kernel.py, basically very important file that basically has the different settings for all the components of our application, jobs, models, controllers, and all that stuff. I won't go so much into it. We have the make file, we have packet.json, and so on and so forth. So what you're interested in here is going to be our craft file, and this craft file is going to help us to run our different management commands. So I'm going to open up our file or our terminal. And when I open up our terminal, we're going to begin by writing Python. It's actually going to be Python, and then I'll say Python craft. And when I say Python craft, in this case, we're going to see a list of commands that are specific to our project. Now, such commands can be to help us to create our models, to create our controllers, and so on. So these are the different commands and the different things they will be able to do. If we want to interact with our database, we may use Python craft db shell, and this will allow us to create to be able to connect to our database. If we want to create, let's say, a model, we use the Python craft model, and so on and so forth. Now, since we are dealing with an MVC application, the first thing we're going to do is to deal with our models. So we have not yet created that database, but we're going to go ahead and create that. So the first thing I have to do is to check our env file, and within our env file, I'm going to go within our database connection or within our database specific settings. I'm going to change our settings from using SQLite to using MySQL. I actually messed it up. So I'll change this to MySQL. And I'll also change the database. So basically you're not going to use SQLite. So our DB host is going to be localhost, our username will be root, and our password will be a blank string. So we shall also change our database from to, let's actually just keep it to Masonite, if you don't mind. So we have our port as 3306, which is the default port for MySQL, have dblog to true. So I'll just go ahead and save this. So now if you're wondering, these environment variables actually I used to set up within our config database.py. So that's where we actually have the different settings that are specific to each of the databases you may want to use. And the way it achieves this is to actually read our env file. So we see for MySQL we have the db host, db username, password, and all that stuff we have set up in our env file. So I'll go ahead and close this and also close our env file. Now at this point we're going to begin by creating our database. So I'll do that with php-myadmin, and I'll create a new MySQL database. So in our Chrome right here, I've already opened my php-myadmin. I'm going to create a new database, and I'm going to call this database Masonite, and I'm going to press create. Now this database has been created. So after creating this database, the next thing I'm going to do is to write a migration. So a migration is simply a file that describes how we are going to write database tables, or how we're going to actually describe our database schema. So I'm going to go back to our code right here, and I'm going to open up a terminal, and I'll call our management script. So I'll say Python craft, and in this case we shall create a migration. So I'll just say migration and then give this migration a name. Now when you're creating a migration, we need to specify what this migration is going to do. For example, in this case we want to create a task table, so we're just going to say create tasks table, and what we shall do is to go ahead and basically run this. So this is going to go ahead and create our tasks table. Now press enter. This is going to tell us that our migration file has been created and it's found within our databases migrations. So we're going to find it in databases migrations, and then we shall go ahead and look at our create tasks table migration. Now if you're observant, our tasks table has been our tasks table class. Our create tasks table migration class is created from our statement for creating our tasks table. Now the migration file is always having the date and the number of the migration and the name that we gave to that specific migration. The name of the table is actually generated from where we specify the create tasks table, just like you see here. So we have been able to create our migration, and this is going to allow us to basically go ahead and describe how we shall set up our database. Now let us go ahead and do this. So what I'll do is to go ahead and basically just document how we shall set up our database table. So I'm going to write a simple doc string right here, and what we shall have is table. So we're going to have a simple table, and this is going to be our table for tasks. So just going to say tasks, and these are the various fields that you may have. So we're going to have the ID, which is already specified right here, and what we have is actually a class. So this class has two methods, which are the up and the down method. The up method is what helps us to describe our database table, and the up method, the down method, is what is going to allow us to undo the changes that we will do with the migration. So let us go ahead and basically describe these fields. So we're going to have the ID, and this is already an integer, which is going to be auto incrementing. That's why we see table dot increments. So this will be our ID, which is going to be an integer. We shall also have the content of that specific task. So let us just say we're going to have the content, and the content is going to be a string. So we can also specify the length of the string. So we shall have 255 characters. We're going to also have the description. So I'm just going to leave this as a description. Now this is going to be text, and we don't want to specify the length because it will be long. So we also have another attribute called is complete, which is going to specify whether a task is complete or not. Now is complete is going to be a true or false value. So shall call this a boolean, and it will have the value of true or false. So once we have this, then let us go ahead and basically write this in our code. Now if you're observant, you'll see table.timestamps, and this is basically a field that generates for us two fields. Now these two fields are the created at and the updated at. So created at is just a datetime value for when we create a certain database entry, such as our task in this case. And updated at basically keeps track of when we last updated that specific entry. So I'm going to go ahead and describe this field. So I'll just come right here and I'll begin by describing our content. So I'll say table.string. Now a string or any field basically takes in the first attribute as our column. So we give in a column name, and the column name in this case is going to be our content. The next is going to be the length or the max length of that specific field. Now in this case I can say length, and the length in this case is going to be 255. Now after doing that, then the next thing is actually going to be describing our content, which is going to be table dot, in this case we shall say text, and shall provide our column name as our description. And once we've done with that, we are going to go ahead and describe our isComplete attribute. So shall do that with table dot boolean, and in this case we shall just come and say our boolean is going to be a column, which is going to be is complete. And once we have done that, then we can also specify a default by saying dot default, and in this case we are going to specify our default having a value of false. Now that we are done with describing our migration, let us go ahead and run this migration so that we can be able to have our first database table. So I'll first actually save and then pull up our terminal right here. I'll clear it with Ctrl and L, and then go ahead and say Python craft, and then here I'm going to come and say migrate. So if you're observant, we already have some migration files in here, such as one for our password reset table and our user table. So Masonite also creates for us a default user and a password reset table. So I'm going to close this and run our migration. So at this point we see that we have an error. We have not installed a database driver for MySQL. So to do that, I'll install my PyMySQL. So I'll do pip install PyMySQL, and this will go ahead and install PyMySQL that will allow us to actually connect to MySQL. So once this is done, let us go ahead and migrate. So I'll just call our migrate command again. And that will go ahead and migrate all these changes to our database. So it seems like we have an error here, and it's saying that we actually wrote something here, and this is actually default. I passed it in as a lowercase false, and this is actually in Python, so you have to specify it as false. I'll save and then go ahead and rerun our migration. So this will go ahead and create our table for our tasks. So it seems like we still have an error, so let us see table tasks already exists, and I think we shall have to first drop it and then go ahead and recreate it. So I'm just going to go within our Masonite. So let's just see our Masonite table right here. Our tasks table has been created. So let me first actually drop it and then recreate it so that we'll be able to have it having our default value. It's actually going to be in our SQL tab right here. So I'm just going to go ahead, and what I have to do is to basically say drop table, and then we shall say tasks. And once I've done that, I'll just simply press the go button and say OK. And this is going to go ahead and drop that table. So I'll run our migration once again. And that is going to go ahead and create our migration, or create our table for tasks. Now if we go back to our MySQL right here and we look at our table structure, we're going to have our task created. So it seems like we already have our tasks. So we have our ID, content, description, and all the other fields that we've described in our migration. Now we have been able to create a database table at this point, and we need a way for us to be able to interact with this database table. Now that's where our models come in. A model is simply a class that allows us to interact with our database table. Now in the model view controller pattern, this is the M, and it's what we're going to actually build. So when I go back to our code right here, we are going to create our model and attach it to this specific table. So the way we're going to do that is by calling Python craft and then model. So we shall name our model our task model. So a task or any model in Masonite is always named with a singular, and it also has to start with a capital letter or an uppercase letter, just like you see right here. So I'm going to enter. And this is going to say that our models has been created in app models task.py, and I can simply control and click, and this will take us to that file which is found in our app models and then task.py. However, we also have a user model created as a default model. So what we shall have to do is to attach this model class to our table. So to do that, I'll just simply come and describe an attribute on this class, and that attribute is going to be the Danda table attribute, and this is going to be the name of the table. So the table we've created is actually called tasks, and this is just enough for this. So at this point, we've actually dealt with our model part of our MVC. Now let us go ahead and deal with our controller. So a controller is what sits in between our views as well as our models, and what it normally does is to basically process requests, be able to handle data and process it, store it in our database, as well as handle the way users create data in a database, as we're going to see. So what I'm going to do is to create our controller. So we're going to call this the task controller. Now I'm just going to come here, and all I have to do is to say Python craft, and in this case I'll just say controller. So this is going to create our controller, and what you're going to say, we're going to call this our task controller, and this task controller is going to be a resource controller. So what is a resource controller? A resource controller is one that's going to allow us to create all the handler methods for our create, read, update, and delete functionalities, just like you know in a normal CRUD app. So I'll just come and say that we shall have this as our resource. This will go ahead and generate all our controller methods. And this is telling us that it has created our controller, and that is found within our app controllers and then task controller. Now if we go into our app controllers, we already have a task controller and a welcome controller already generated for us by default. Now a task controller is having all the different methods or actions that you may want for a specific task. Now if you're to look at a controller is just a class that inherits from controller, and it basically has all these methods. These methods allow us to do the different things such as creating, reading, updating, and deleting. So there's a certain convention or way in which the model view controller based frameworks dictate how we may write our handler functions, and this is how we actually generate or write these functions. So we have the index method, and what it does is to help us to basically show all, or show the homepage of our application with all our database records. And the create is what helps us to show the form for creating. The store helps us to basically go ahead and store our records in a database. We have the show command that is simply the one to show us one record. We have the edit command, and what this does is to help us to basically show the form for updating a record. Update actually does the actual updating in our database, and destroy for deleting our record. Now if you're observant, you'll see that each of these methods has view.render. Now view is basically a parameter that's being given to each of these handler functions, and it is of type view. So the view class is one that's responsible for handling everything involved with our views or our HTML templates. Now if you're wondering how we create a view, the way we create a view is by going within our templates and creating a file here. So we have a task controller, and in this case it doesn't have any views yet. So what you're going to do is to actually create the different views that we shall be displaying using our controller. So we have a view.render function that takes in the HTML template to be rendered, and let's see how we're going to do that. So I'll come within our templates, and what I'll do is to create a new folder. So this new folder is going to be called tasks. Oh, sorry for this. We need to undo this and save. I'll close this for now. Now, when you go back to our templates right here, I'll create a new folder, and I'll call this our tasks folder, and we are going to create our HTML templates basically basing on the different functions that we're going to do here. Now I'm going to begin by creating our index.html, and within our index.html actually I'm going to create another file that I'll call, so just check for a controller method here. So I'll create a file called create.html. I'm actually going to just close everything so I have to focus on our templates. So within our tasks we shall have our create.html, and then we are also going to have our show.html. So shall create a new file which we are going to create and call show.html. We're also going to have one that we are going to call our update.html. Oh, sorry for this. I'm going to remove that so that we come and actually add it here. Now after doing this, excuse me, so after doing that we're going to go within our controllers and we're going to render each of these templates we've created. So we're going to begin by rendering our index.html, and then we're going to go and render our create.html, and actually these are all found within our tasks, and the way we actually write our templates is by calling our templates in this syntax. So we call the folder in which they are, and then we go ahead and basically call the name of the templates we are actually referring to. So in this case this is going to be tasks.index, and then here we shall call tasks.create, and then we shall go ahead and also call tasks.store, and then we shall call tasks. So this is actually not going to involve us having our template. So instead of having a template here, we're going to have it on tasks.show, and because these are the ones that are going to actually be displaying templates, so we shall ignore creating templates for those that do not require them. So in this case, we shall have one for actually updating. So just going to rename this to update. And then here we shall have update. So this is going to be tasks dot edit, and then here this is going to actually do the actual updating. So it's actually going to be tasks, and for this we shall not require templates. Now the way we have this is we have these controller methods, but you are going to need a way to register them onto routes so that you'll be able to do different things. Now to be able to do this, we shall go within our web.py in our routes. So just going to close this for now, and when you go in our web.py, we are actually having a controller which is showing us the show method of our welcome controller that's created for us by default. Now let us go ahead and create our own controller. So I'm going to get rid of this controller, and I'm going to remove this controller for now. And then what I have to do is to generate the controllers, actually map the controller of our task controller to and its different methods to different routes. So the way I'm going to do that is by coming and saying route. So we have this route class, and what we do is to access the different HTTP methods. Now in this case, when we have the get method, we have to just say route.get, and then we specify the URL. Now in this case, we're accessing the root URL. The next thing is to attach the controller. So we attach the controller, so we name our task controller task controller. So I'll just copy the task controller name, and I'll save this actually. And then when we go to our web.py, I'll paste in our task controller and then say at, and then specify the handler method. So the handler method in this case is going to be our index. So I'll just copy the index file right here, or the index method, and then specify that here we're going to have our task index. Now let us go ahead and repeat this for the different routes that we're going to have. So I'm just going to copy this for the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 routes that we have, and then you go ahead and just do it for the remaining routes. So I'm just going to come and copy this and paste it. So I'm just going to come and copy paste, copy paste, copy paste. This is 6 and this is 7. So the next route we're going to actually deal with is the one for create, which is going to be a get request. This is going to return for us a template. Now I'm just going to come and say that this is going to be phone on / create. So just going to call this create, and it's going to have the create handler method. So the next one is going to be for show. So show is going to require us to basically get the ID of a specific task. So we shall just be able to get it within our view right here. So it's going to be for our show. So I'm actually going to go, we're actually dealing with store that's next. So I'm just going to go and map that onto its own. So I'll just actually come and say /store, and then here we shall have our handler method as store. And then I'll go ahead and also specify the one for show. So this is going to require us to have an ID. So I can just come and say tasks and then / the ID. So the way we pass in a parameter is by saying at and then specifying the parameter. In this case, our parameter is going to be our ID. Now we're going to do the same thing. So this is going to be show. So so actually I can say maybe create task and then maybe store task, so that we'll be able to have the names being simple for us. So what we have is task /ID, which is for show. We can also have the same URL for the remaining ones, since they also require us to query for a task by the ID. Now just going to copy this and also paste in this, and also I'm just going to come and also paste this. So we're going to have task ID. So this is going to be for show. The next one will be for edit, and the one will be for update and destroy. So just going to come change the controller methods to edit, and then update. So it's actually going to do the real saving via update and then destroy. So once we are done with this, I'm going to go ahead and save. So let us go ahead and look at our templates. Let's begin constructing the view layer of our application. So I'm going to pull up our terminal, and all I have to do is to write Python craft, and then when I say serve, this is going to start our development server. So our development server is being started at localhost 8000. I'll control and click, and then this will take us to our new browser. So we actually have our template here. And at this point, we are able to see our home page. So this is our index template. So if you want to basically be able to show some inheritance, or basically describe a layout, you can do it the same way we do it within our Django or our Flask, and that's by describing a layout file. So since we have a layout file already described for us, we're going to go ahead and basically inherit from that layout file. So I'll open our layout file. Let me go ahead and first close some of these files right here. So our layout file is found within our templates, and it's called our base.html. So I'll go ahead and modify this a little bit. So instead of having our blockhead, I'm going to remove our blockhead, and then remove some of these links. So what you're actually going to have is block content and end block content, which is actually going to have the main layout of our application or the content for a specific page. Now we shall basically describe a simple nav bar. So I'm just going to come and basically specify a simple nav bar, or what you can actually do is to hit two birds with one stone by using our by using Bootstrap. So let me go and actually pick up Bootstrap for the styling. So I'm just going to go to Bootstrap, and I'll basically go to the getting started section. What I'm going to do is to I'm going to copy the links to our setup. So I actually need to download the Bootstrap, and then I go to the section where we actually get it via CDN. So I'll just copy the links for the link of CSS and JS. So I'll just come right here and paste it within our head tag. So our script is going to be just below our content. So I'll just cut it here and then paste it in here and save. So right after doing that, then the next thing is going to be to describe our nav bar. So I'll place everything within our layout so that it is within a container. So I'll just basically describe div with the class of container. And what we shall have here is a div with a class of container, and I'll place our block tags within this container div. And once we have this, then I'll go ahead and describe a simple nav bar. So when I go, I'm going to go to our docs, and then I'll basically go to our layout. So within our examples, so let us go to our example section. I won't actually go to the examples. I think that's within our docs, and then that's within our docs, and then it's going to be on our nav bars. So I basically search for nav bar. So just come to nav, and this is going to show us a navbar. So all we need to do is to basically select a simple navbar. So I'm just going to choose a very simple navbar. I'll copy this and then paste it within our code right here. It's just that we have a simple navbar. So instead of having all these links, what you're going to actually have is a simple link to our home page and a page where we shall create our posts. So I'm going to call this our home page, and I'll specify that this is going to be our home. Now this has to have a link, and I'll specify that our link is going to be to our home route. However, Masonite gives us a route function that helps us to basically specify a route dynamically, so that we don't have to change it each time we come to our template. Now the way we'll be able to describe the name of each of our routes is by going within our web.py, within our routes folder. So I'll go to routes and then go to our web.py. Now in here we can go ahead and specify the names of each of the different routes that we need to access. So when we have route.get, you can go ahead and specify a name. So I'll say dot name and then provide a name for this route. So I can just say that this is going to be index, and then I'll say here we shall have the name, and the name in this case is going to be the one for create. So once you have that, then I'll go and basically specify a name, and the name in this case is going to be store. And once you have this, then you can go ahead and say name, and here we shall have show. So that we basically refer to this using our route function, as you're going to see. So I'm just going to come and say that we're going to have this having our name, and our name is going to be edit. We shall also have our name here, and our name is going to be update. So refer this, so it's going to be update, and this is going to be destroy. So just going to come and say destroy. Now once we have this, we can just call our route function and then be able to describe or specify a certain route. For example, if we wanted to name our route home, we shall just come and say route, and then here we shall have our home, since we named it home. And then if we want to go to the post creation page, what you shall have to do is to just call this. So I'll just say create post. So I'll just come and say this is going to be the page for us to create our post. And once you have this, I'll basically also provide the URL, as I'll just basically call this route, and then here I'll specify that this is going to be for creating a post. So it's the one that we actually refer to as our create page. So I'll just go ahead and say route to create and save. So when you go back and refresh on our page, what you're actually going to have is let me actually see whether our terminal, our server is running. So our server has restarted. Let me actually stop this and refresh. So at this point we don't have anything. So what you need to do is to actually edit our index.html page. So I'll go to tasks, index.html, and all I have to do is to specify that we're actually inheriting from our layout template. So to do that, I'll just come and say extends, and then I'll say base.html, and all I have to do is to specify the block and the content. So I'll just come and say block content and then block content and save. So when I save, I'll go ahead and refresh, hoping that our server is still running. Our server restarted. So when you go back here, we need to first stop this and refresh. Seems like we have an error here, and it's telling us that could not find a route with the name of home. So let us see what this is. So we actually named this home, but the name of the route is actually index, and that's why it's not working. So I'll just come here and say that we're going to have our route named index. So when I go ahead and save, we go back here. When I refresh, we are actually going to have this error fixed. Hope our server is running. So when you go back here, stop this and then run it again. And now we see that our home page is being displayed. So let us change this to basically what we shall have as our task. So what I'm going to do is to come and change this from our task. So let's actually maybe call our app task list. So once we have this, we can also basically just pass in our route for index. So I'll just come right here and pass in our route for index. I'll save, refresh, and now we see our app is going to change to our task list, our home, our post. So everything is working fine. So when you go to home, you're going to be on our home page, and when you go to our create post page, we are going to be on our create post page. So when you go to create post, you're going to go, it's actually create task. So this is actually going to be our page for creating a task. So let us go ahead and set up our page for creating a task. So I'm just going to actually come and say that this is going to be our create task page. And once we have our create task page, we are going to go ahead and set up this page for creating a task. So I'll go to create.html, and the first thing I'll do is to inherit our layout. So I'll do that with extends, and then it's going to be extends, and we shall extend. Now if you're wondering how I'm doing this Ginger 2 templating syntax with ease, I'm using the Janero extension, which is the Janero extension. Basically gives you Django snippets and some helpful Ginger 2 snippets. So once I've done this, then I'll just go right in here, and what I have to do is to specify that we are inheriting from base.html, and I'll also provide the block content. So it's actually going to be block, press tab, so this will give us block content. I'll save, and this is where the actual layout of our form is going to be. So when I go in here, I'm going to actually save, and when you go and refresh, we shall see that our page is now being created. So let us go ahead and basically describe how this is going to be. So the way we're going to do that is we are going to create a simple form, and this form is going to help us to basically generate our form for creating a task. Now if we are wondering, the fields that we are going to need are going to be the content, the description, and is complete, and is created at, updated at. So I'm just going to come, and what you shall have to do is to basically come here. So we are going to need the form, so I'll just basically write a simple h2 and basically say that's going to be for create a task. And once we're done with this, I'm going to go ahead and also create a form. So I'll create a simple div with a class of form, and once you have this div, I'm going to go ahead and specify our form. So I'll write a form, and this form is going to be a form having a method of post. Now we're going to specify the action for this, and it's going to be a route that's going to allow us to basically go ahead and store this post in our database. So when you go to our web.py, the route that's specified to do that is going to be our store route. So I'll go ahead and copy this name, and once I come here, I'm just going to go ahead and use our route function to point to that route. So I'll say route, and then I'll provide the store name. Now let us go ahead and describe the different fields. Now the first and most important field that we need is going to be our CRF token field. Now if you've worked with Django or Flask, once you submit a form, we need to specify a CRF token for it. So you shall have to do that by coming and specifying it. So the way we're going to do that is by coming and saying CSRF and then token. Wonder if this is it. I keep on forgetting, so I'll go and basically check in our Masonite framework docs. So what I'll do is to search for our CSRF. So I'll press enter, and this is going to be bringing for us the part of the docs that has that specific documentation. So this is actually CSRF field, so we are going to change this from CRF token to CSRF field. Now I'll go ahead and describe the different fields that we need for our form. Now the first field, I'm going to create a form group, so I'll just come and say form group, and within our form group we're going to have our label, and this label is going to be for our content. So the content here I'll just have to basically pass in the content, and we are also going to pass in an input of type text. Now we shall provide this with a CSS class or form control. Now this is specific to Bootstrap and it will be styled for us. So this is going to have a name, and our name is going to be content, and this will be content. And when you go ahead and save, we shall go ahead and see that our form is being generated right here. So you actually have our content. So let us go ahead and also provide other fields. Now we're going to need to provide our text or our description. So this is going to be a description, and this description we're going to actually name we're going to create a text area, since this is actually going to be text. So I'm just going to come and say text area, and this text area is going to have a name of content. It's going to have a class of form control, and it's going to have our ID of content, but shall not use it that much. And these are the different things it's going to have. Now shall also provide an input of type submit, and we can also give this a class, a Bootstrap class of, let's say, btn and then btn primary. So I'm going to provide btn primary. So when you save and you go right here, this is actually going to provide for us a form. However, we haven't submitted a value for this, so let us provide the value. So shall just go ahead and say save. Now when we specify that, I'll come and refresh, and this is going to have our value of save. So we've created a simple form that is supposed to help us to go ahead and create a task. Alright, so let us go ahead and also basically make this task save to our database. So at this point we don't have anything in our database and we need to create our tasks. So the way we're going to do that is by coming within our template, and once we have done describing what our store method is actually going to do, let us actually provide in some data. So when providing some data, we provide our description and save. We're going to be site cannot be reached under if our server is still running. So our server was actually restarting. So let me continue. Seem like we have an error here. So method not allowed. So it seems like we have an error. Let us actually first check this out. So when I stop our server, I'm going to go ahead and first look at why we are getting this error. So we actually specified this to be get, but this was actually supposed to be post. So the get routes are the ones for the index page, the create page which you actually rendered, and the one for storing is supposed to be a post request. So I'm going to change this from route.get. I'll change the method to route.post. Now I'll also do the same thing for our pages. For show, it's going to be a get method. For edit, it will be a get method because that's the page it's going to render the form for updating a specific task. For update, it's going to be a put method. So what you're actually going to do is to basically say this can be a post method or it can be a put method. Let's make it a post method, and here we can say this is going to be a delete method. So you can just come and say route.delete, and then we shall destroy that specific route. For that, we shall destroy that specific route. We shall actually just get rid of a specific task. So when I go ahead and save, and what we're going to do is to go ahead and basically try to refresh again. When I continue, it's actually we are having the same error. So our server wasn't running, so I'll run it again with Python craft serve. So when you go back and refresh, I'm going to continue. Seems like we're still having so self.template not found. So we're actually required to display a template. So let us go ahead and describe the actual logic for creating this application. I'll just stop our server with Control and C and then describe what that function does. So let us go ahead and do what it does. So I'll go to web, I'll go to our task controller, and then within our store method, we're going to go ahead and basically describe what happens if we want to save a specific task to our database. Now the first thing I'll do is to first remove this, and let us first redirect to the home page. So for us to be able to redirect, since these handlers or these methods for our controllers, they basically get an HTTP request and then turn it into an HTTP response. So the way we do that is by passing in our response within the handler. So I'll do that by coming right here, and then I'll say that we shall have our, so in this case I'll just come and say response, and this response is going to be of type response, so we shall have to import our response class. So I'll just come and say from masonite.response, we are going to import our response. And once we have this, then we shall have to just basically pass in our response. So our response is going to be of type response, and if we want to redirect to any page, all we have to do is to say return response. It's actually going to be return response dot redirect, and then we specify the specific function we want to redirect to. So now in this case, this is actually going to be our home page. So we may just say redirect to the home page and save. And when we have this, when I save, I'm going to go back to our template. So when I refresh and continue, still we have an error. So it's going to be a lot of debugging. We haven't started our server, so I'm going to restart our server. So our server is running. So what I'm going to do is to go back to our browser and then try to resubmit our form. So let us see what is actually happening here. So this is actually going to redirect us to our home page. So it seems like our server can successfully redirect us to our home page. Now what we want to do is to go ahead. Sorry for that interruption. So what I was saying is we are going to submit our form. So let us provide some dummy data in here and then go ahead and save. So we are currently just redirecting to our home page. Now what we want to do is each time we create a post or actually each time we create a task or an entry into our database, we want to redirect to our home page after creating our post. So the way we're going to do that is by getting the data that we submit via our post request and then using that data to go ahead and save each task to our database. So let us go ahead and do that. So I'm actually going to put on my headsets right here and I'll go ahead and basically create a task. So they're going to handle that is by first getting our tasks. So when the way we're going to get our tasks data is we are going to create our task data by saying post data. So that's the data we send via our post request, and this is going to be from our request. So we also have to pass in a request here. So we're going to pass in a request which is going to be of type request. Now we shall have to import our request. So I'm going to say from masonite dot request we are going to import our request class, and after importing our request class, then let us go ahead and type hint this. So we're going to basically provide a request and then come. So we're going to have our post data. Our post data is going to be having a request, so shall access this via request, and then we shall say request dot only. So we can specify the fields that we want to access. So in this case we are going to say request dot only, and then we shall provide the type of data that we want. So this is actually supposed to be the class of request, and why I did this mistake. So we shall have request, and then here we shall have request, and then here we shall have only. So we shall provide the data that we need, which is the content as well as the description. So this will be a string. And now that we've basically got this, let us go ahead and create a post using this data that we've actually got from our post request. So the way we're going to do that is by coming right here. I'll just basically call our post model, because it's actually what you're going to use to create a new post entry. So I'm just going to come and say from app.models dot post, or actually it's going to be task. So I'm just going to have task. We are going to import our task model. So after importing our task model, the next thing is going to be to just use our task model to save our tasks. So I'll just come and say task dot create, and then we shall just pass in our post data. So I'll just come and say the dictionary. Post data is going to be a dictionary, so I'll just pass it in here, and this is just enough to save our data. Now if we want to verify that our post has been created, each time we shall be redirecting to our home page, we want to be showing created posts in our database. So the way we're going to do that is by coming to our index page, and we're going to have our posts. So I'm just going to create a dictionary called context, and it's going to be an empty dictionary for now. So each time we render a template, we also need to render the dictionary containing the data that specific template is going to have. So I'll just come here and say that this is going to be our context, and once we have this, I'll just come and say that shall have our tasks, and this is going to be equal to our tasks. So we shall have to get our tasks. So I'm just going to come and say tasks is going to be a variable that's going to be a result of querying for all our tasks. Now I'm going to come and say tasks task dot, then I'll call that all method, And using the Masonite ORM, it's the tool that actually helps us to use or query our database models. So task.o is just a simple way in which we can return all the tasks that we have in our database. Now I'm just going to come here and say that our task is going to be our tasks. Now by doing this, I've already catered for the page for our index, the page for creating, and the page for storing our actual data into the database. So let us go ahead and look at this. So I'm going to go ahead and what I'll do is to try it out on our server. So in actually our application, when I go to create a task, go to the create task page. So on our create task page, I'll create some sample title, sample contents. So this is going to be sample content, and this I'll say this is a sample description. So when I save, we're going to be redirected to our home page, and at this point it has no data, so we have to basically specify a way in which you're going to be displaying our data. So let us go ahead and describe our data. So what I'm going to do is to come on our template of our index.html, and then I'm just going to basically say going to create a div of class, let's say Jumbotron. Let's just create a div of class Jumbotron, and then in here we shall have a simple h2. So let us basically have an h1. So we're going to have an h1, and this is going to be latest posts, and here we shall have what we want to have here is basically a post for. So what you want to do is to basically loop through each of the posts. So for each of the posts, we are going to use a for loop or a for block tag. So I'm just going to come and call a for tag, and in here we shall have for task in tasks. Then we shall specify the HTML that you're going to provide for each of the tasks. So what I'm going to do is to go ahead and provide an h2 containing the task title. So I'll say task.title, and then I'll also basically provide a paragraph for the task content. So I'll just say task. So maybe I'll say task dot content, and then save. So when I save, when you come back here and refresh, we are actually going to have our first task being returned to us. So when I go, I can actually say that maybe we have a detail page. So I'll just basically provide an anchor tag, and this is going to be having our detail. So just going to call this our detail, and then here I need to provide the URL to our show route. So I have to basically provide this route for showing an individual task. So we're also going to take care of that. So I'll just come here, and when I save, so this is actually supposed to redirect us to the page to show us a specific task. So we have our detail link right here. So when we go back to our controller for showing a task, we have to query for that specific task. So I'm just going to come and say that the task that we want to get is going to be equal to task dot. In this case, we can basically query for a specific task using its ID. Now the way we be getting those IDs from our URLs is via the request parameter that we pass into our request handler or our controller method. So we can basically come here and say request, and then this request is going to be of type request, and what you can do is to basically provide our ID. So our ID is going to be a request parameter, so shall say request.param, and then here we shall specify the param, which is going to be an ID. So we can just come and say request.find, And since this will just give us an error and stop our application from running, we shall use find or fail. In case we don't find that specific task, then we provide our ID. So our ID is going to be our ID. Now, can do the same thing just like we did for our context. So I'm just going to copy our context dictionary right here, and so instead of having tasks, I'm going to have tasks since we want a single task. So this is going to be task and this will be task, and I'll basically provide our context dictionary. So I'll go ahead and save, and now let's edit our show. We're going to edit our show template. So when you go to our templates right here, what I'm going to do is to first extend our layout. So I'll say extends and then say base.html. So I'll just come and say block, and then shall have content. I'll save, and after doing this, then the next thing we're going to actually do is to basically show the detail of that specific post. Now I'm just going to create a simple jumbotron. So it's going to be jumbotron, and this jumbotron will have an h1, and this h1 is going to have the title. So we shall have the title. So in this case we shall just have the task. It's not actually going to be the title, it's going to be the content. So we shall have the task content, the task description. So we shall have a paragraph, and this will have task dot description. It's actually going to be a lowercase, and since we have timestamps, we can actually also show those. So we may have small and then bold. I'm going to basically provide bold, and then we can basically say created at, and then we pass in the task dot created at. Now if you're wondering, those are the timestamps we actually left in our migration. So shall just have created at and save. So what we need is to actually go ahead and specify a way for us to be able to come to this detail page. So I'll go back to our index.html, and then right here we are going to use our route function. So I'll just come and say route, and then we shall provide our route. So in this case it's going to be show, but this show method is going to have a parameter just like you see in our URL. It's going to have an ID param. So the way we pass that in is by specifying another argument to our route function, and that is going to be the data, or the data that we want to pass in. So in this case we pass in the ID, and then the value will be the post ID. So we're going to say post.id and then save. So once we have this, then we can actually be able to redirect to that specific post. Oh, it's actually not going to be a post, it's going to be a task. Oh, I don't know why I'm so caught up in the blocks. So this is going to be a task. So once we have that, I'm going to save and refresh. So when we refresh, in this case we're going to basically click our detail and then be able to redirect to the detail page of each of the posts. So when you go right here, we're going to see the content. I think we made a mistake, the description is not being shown, but let's see how that's going to be shown. So it's actually going to be the task content and then the description. I wonder why I'm making such a mistake. So this is going to be the content, this will be the description, and save. So when you go back here and refresh, so task description, task content, I wonder if we did a mistake but it seems like we did it right. So let me go back to our index.html. For task in task we have a description. So let me actually copy this, and then within our show I'll provide the same thing, provide some indentation, save, and then go back. So when I refresh, I don't know why the description is not showing up. Let's try to see. Created at that. However, I can also edit this and maybe change it to 1 strf time. So let us see how we're going to deal with the description, because it's not being shown. Task.description, task.content, task.description. Let me try to see. Such a way I will create. So let's first go to our home. We see our sample content, our sample title, which is our sample content. Our sample content is one that's actually being shown. I don't know. It seems like our description was not saved. So let's go ahead and see why. When you create a post, go to our description. Oh, we forgot to actually save the name, and the name is supposed to actually have the description. Save, and go ahead and refresh. So when you go ahead and create a new task, so here we shall have some task data. So I'll just come and say this let's say the task is going to be, let's say, learn Python, and then let's say the description will be teach my kids Python, and then let's say save. So redirect to our home page. Shall have two tasks right now: learn Python and teach my kids Python. So this actually has a description because now it has saved the description. So let us go to the detail, and now we see that this task actually has the description. So what you're going to do is to actually also create links that can help us to update as well as delete that specific post. So actually it's not a post, a specific task. So what you're going to do is to basically provide links. I'm going to come here and provide an ed tag, which is an anchor tag. So I'll provide a class of btn, and then btn it's going to be btn let's say success, and here I'll provide the route. So basically I'm going to provide the route of edit. So this will take us to the edit, and then we shall also provide the ID of the specific task we want to edit, because the URL takes in the param of a specific task we want to edit. So now what you're going to do in this case is to just come and say edit, and then here we are going to come and say that the value is going to be the task ID. I don't know why I still call it a post. This is going to be the task ID. So I'm going to save, and I'm going to pass in update. So when I save, I'm going to go ahead and refresh, and here we have a button for our update. So if I want this to be on a new line, what I'll maybe do is to basically pass in our button, basically provide a div, or I'll basically put all these in a paragraph of sorts. Maybe provide a paragraph. This is just for demonstration purposes, so not that the best at writing HTML, but let's save. So this will be on a new line. So we have update, and then we can do the same thing for delete. So maybe what I'll do is to provide a same route, and this is going to basically route to our destroy route. So just going to say destroy, and since this also takes in the ID of the task, now I'll just have to provide that. I'll copy it and then provide it here. So I'll just come here, and all I have to do is to provide a class. Now in this case our class is going to be btn danger. So this will be delete. So once we have this, then I'll go ahead and save, refresh, and then this will be deleting. So we haven't yet handled this, but let's see. When you go to read to update, it's supposed to actually redirect us to the update page, which is not actually happening. Let's see what's not happening. So edit supposed to take us to the edit page. So let us go to the edit page. That's actually within our edit, and we are going to first extend the layout. So this is going to be extends, and then here we're going to say extend space.html, and then we are going to say block, and then here we shall just paste in block content. Okay, so once you have that, then what we're going to do is to actually use the same form we used to create our posts. I'll just basically provide that and go within our edit, save. So this is actually going to be for update task. So I'll change the heading to update task, and once we have this, then we shall have the content as well as the description. Now we have to provide values, because then we shall have data for that specific task we want to update. So in this case, it's going to be value, and the value is going to be task dot content, and then here we shall have our task description. So shall have task dot description. So when I save, let's try to navigate to our page. Seems like we're still redirecting to the same page. Let us try to maybe change our routes. So instead of having tasks ID, so what I'll do is to maybe change this from task ID to edit, then slash ID. So I'll just come and say edit, so refresh, and then I'll go to slash edit. Seems like it's just redirecting us to this. So let's see. When I go to our, haven't actually saved here, so I'll have to save, then refresh, hoping that our server is also running. So it has just restarted. Okay, so when I try, it's actually not redirecting us to where we want to be. So let us try to see what's happening here. So when I go and try to view our page source, actually try to view the page source so that you see where the links are actually taking us. So what you have is two links, one taking us to edit and then slash the ID of the post to edit, and the one that's taking us to slash tasks slash task ID. So I wonder why this is not working, but let's see. So let's see, this is actually slash, and then let's say this is going to be, let's just call this slash destroy or slash delete, and then let me say it's going to be slash update. So when you refresh, actually needed, if I say our server restart. So when I restart, refresh, that's actually see when I view page source. I actually see edit and destroy. So let us try to go and navigate to those links. So when I go to slash edit, this is actually going to take us to So you're telling us task is undefined, so we have to describe this within our controller method. So what I have to do is to go to /controller to our task controller class, and then within our task controller class you have to define the task, which is going to be it's going to be the same as the ID we used for our show method. So I'm just going to come and say, and basically paste this code, and here we shall also have to provide our request. So I'll have to provide our request as an argument, or as a parameter in this case. Sorry guys, I'm a bit tired. So I'll just come right here, and all I have to do is to pass it in. So just like we did for our context here, we shall also do the same. So I'll just come and say context, and I'll just come and say that we shall have the same context. So when I save, when we refresh, seems like our server is restarting. Let's stop this from reloading. Okay, so let's restart or refresh, and now we see that our form actually has our data. Alright, so it seems like now we are safe. What you need to do is to just change the method, or to change the action of this form. So we're going to go to /edit, and then we shall change this from store to update, and then we shall also have to provide the ID of that specific task we want to update. So just going to come in here, and all I have to do is to pass in the task. It's actually going to be the ID. And we shall just be passing in the task ID. So this will be task.id. So once we have this, I'm going to save, and when we go back and try to refresh, we haven't actually written any code to handle what happens when we update a post or update a task. So let us go ahead and work on that. So what I'm going to do is to close that, and when I go to our task controller, I'm going to work on the update. So let us first redirect to our home page. So we shall do that by first providing our response parameter. So I'll just come and say response. It's going to be of type response. And once I do that, then I just simply come and say return response, redirect. And then here we shall basically redirect to our home page. So when I save, each time we're going to be redirecting to our home page. So I'll first have to refresh this template, hoping that our server has actually restarted. So let us go ahead and try to basically update. So let's learn Python updated, and then save. It's going to just redirect us to our home page. All right, so let us try to go to our detail, and then update. So it's going to do this. So let's try to update each of the posts we have. So first thing we're going to do is to get the request data or the post data. So we shall have to first get to pass in the request object. It's going to be of type request, and then we are going to get a specific request, the request data. So we're going to say our post data, or the data that comes in as a post request, is going to be equal to request dot only, and then here we shall have to get the content as well as the description. So in this case we're going to have the description. Then we shall just have to use our post class or our post model, it's actually going to be our task. So in this case, you just say task dot update. We're actually going to first need to update a certain task, and we shall have to first query for it from the database, and then be able to basically update it to the data that we've got as a result of the request we have made. So the way we need to do that is by first querying for it. So I'm going to repeat the same step. So we shall need to get our ID and get the specific task. And after getting the task, then the next thing will be to update that specific task. So we shall have to say task dot update, and then we shall pass all the post data. So in this case, it's going to be the updated post data. So then we shall have to basically redirect to our home page. So let us go ahead and save. Seems like I've made an error, so I'll save. So our server is going to restart. So let's see what method we actually specified. We specified it to be a post method. So our server is going to restart. So let us try to actually update. So when I refresh, our content is going to be learn Python, and this will be learn Python, let's say updated, and then here we shall say teach my kids Python, and let's say JavaScript. So when you save, it's going to redirect, and now we see that our post has been updated. So it's actually now working. We can update our post. Now let us look at how we can be able to delete our post. So when we delete, we are actually not doing anything. We see that the get method is not allowed. So let us go ahead and try to work with this. So the method is delete. So I don't know how we do this, but let me try to look in the docs right here. Delete request. So delete method. So this is actually going to be our delete method. So let's see what this is going to actually return for us. Sorry, I'm a bit tired right now. It's almost 2 hours into the recording. So what if we actually call this a get method? Let's see what will happen. So when I come and say get, let's see what's going to happen. So this is actually going to restart the server. So when you go back and try to go to our localhost 8000/task/that, when we delete, it's taking long to load, and it's giving us an error here. So template not found. So let us first describe the response that's being returned with that. We need to just redirect to the home page. So after deleting a task, we shall just have to redirect. So we need to remove the view parameter, and then shall just need to return a response. And here we're going to have this response, but it will be of type response, and then we shall just say response dot redirect. Then we shall specify our route of our home page, can also use the route. So just going to save, and so I think what you need to do in this case is to first query for the task. So we shall also need to get the ID of the task. So it's going to be the request, which is going to be of type request, and then after doing that, then the next thing we're going to do is to actually delete. So shall just have to call task.delete or task.delete. Let's actually see. So when I call task.delete, I think that will actually delete our task. So hoping that this is going to work. So let us go ahead here. I'll go back to our page, our home page. So let us try to delete a task. When you go to our detail, I wonder if our server is still restarting. Yeah, our server is still restarting. That's why you see it's a bit slow. So it's actually our page. So when you try to delete, we are being redirected to our home page, and the task has been deleted successfully. So let us try to test each task functionality for our CRUD functionality we want to do. So when I say create task and say content, so let's say learn Java. Let's say I want to learn, it's actually going to be I want to learn Java for Spring Boot. And yeah, so when I say I want to learn Java for Spring Boot and then save, let's go ahead and create a task for us. Let's also create another task, and let's say this is going to be learn JavaScript. And let's say I will be learning some DOM manipulation. Next week. So let's say next week, and then save. So this actually created our task. So we can be able to go to the detail of any of the tasks. So let's go back to the home page. So let's just try to delete the task for, let's actually just update this sample content that doesn't have a detail. So when you go to update, we don't have a description. So let's say this is a sample description, and save. This is actually going to go to, this is a sample description. So let us go ahead and try to delete this post or this task. We actually call them latest task, but they actually, which means I have to update that in our index.html. Instead of saying tasks, we have to say latest tasks. And then I'll just basically go ahead and say that we're going to go to home, and this has changed to latest task instead of latest post. So we have latest tasks. So when you go and go to the detail, this is going to take us to the detail. We can be able to update this. So let's say this is a sample description updated, save, and then we can go to deleting this. So we can say this is a sample content, and then we delete. So let us delete that task, and then it will be deleted. So I think that's been all for this video, and if you've liked it, please leave a like. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll be creating more videos about the Masonite framework. Bye.